Tonight, I'm here to talk to you about anticoagulant rodenticides and their hidden impacts on wildlife. My name is Kaori, like Angela has kindly introduced me. I am a lecturer, but also wildlife ecologist at Deakin University. And I am actually a resident, well, the person who lives quite close to Yarra Ranges Council. So it's really amazing for me personally as well to, talk to you tonight and kind of spread the awareness about this really important issue. So I'd like to start by respectfully acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as our traditional custodians of the unceded land on which I am privileged to live and work, and I pay my respect to their elders past and present. I would also like to introduce the rest of the team that we have at Deakin University. So there are 4 main and academic researchers who are working on this quite big research project. Associate Professor John White, Professor Raylene Cook, Associate Professor Mike Weston, and myself. So we're all from School of Life and Environmental Science at Deakin University, and we also all teach into the wildlife and conservation biology degree at Deakin. We also have a few students who have been working on this, research, including the Kieran and Nick. So I'd like to kind of just introduce them because it's not just me who's doing this research. On that note, I personally think it's pretty boring if I'm talking to you for, 40 minutes, 45 minutes. So I just wanted to start this seminar with finding out how much you actually know about rodenticides and this issue of, impacts of rodenticides on wildlife. So the way I'm going to do this is use this platform called Mentimeter. It's a web-based kind of quiz, kind of fun quiz session, I guess, that we're going to have. No pressure at all. It's all anonymous. Unfortunately, I don't have prize or anything either. So, even if you get perfect mark, I'm sorry, I won't be able to give you any prizes. But on your device, if you can join by maybe just scanning the QR code here, or if you wanted to use just your, internet browser, you can just type in menti.com in your browser and then use the code here, which is 144337H3. And I can see quite a few of you already in there, which is awesome. That means it's working. Cool. And it might ask you for, name and things, but just don't worry about it. Just go with the default. And like I said, just easy. Even if you can't join, which is completely fine because you'll be able to still see the questions and answers. So just maybe have a go at home and see if you can answer all these questions. And as we are going through, you can join at any point by looking at this bit. So I might just get started. There are 7 different questions, all multiple choice answers. And you get about 10 to 13 seconds to answer each question. All right, let's get started. First question. Rodenticides sold at supermarkets are safe for humans and wildlife. Is it true or false? Ooh, people answering very quickly, which is good. All right. Hopefully this was an easy one. So it's false, and that's why I'm here. It is actually not safe for humans or wildlife. But people tend to think they must be safe just because how widely available they are. You can just go to supermarket or hardware stores and just buy it, as many as you want. But they are actually not safe. They are proper poison. And we will go through this, all of these things that we are talking about further in following presentation. All right, second question. All rodenticides work in the same way. So, there are several different kinds of rodenticides. One of them is the anticoagulant rodenticide we're talking about, but there, things like zinc phosphate or different ones. Do they all work the same way? False. Amazing. Everyone's got it right. Yes, they all work differently. But anticoagulant rodenticides kind of work by blocking a thing called vitamin K cycle, which we will talk about a little bit later. But it works in a certain way. All right, next question, which is a third one out of 7. Anticoagulant rodenticides are toxic to which groups of animals? Is it mammals only, mammals and birds, mammals, birds, and reptiles, or is it all vertebrates, so including things like amphibians, frogs, and fish? Oh, everyone's voted. Nice spread. So the answer is all vertebrates. Like I said, it prevents, I guess, or it disrupts the vitamin K cycle. Now, this vitamin K cycle, all vertebrates have it. So all vertebrates, including fish, reptiles, birds, mammals, amphibians, we are all, I guess, impacted by anticoagulant rodenticides. All right, next question. Second generation anticoagulant rodenticides are safer than first generation ARs. So you might have heard them called SGARs, SGARs, FGARs, FGARs. All right, so we're starting to see the split in the answers. So the answer is false. So second generation anticoagulant rodenticides are actually less safe or more dangerous because they are a lot more potent, a lot more toxic compared to first generation anticoagulant rodenticides. All right, we've got a leaderboard coming up. But like I said, this is just having a bit of a fun, finding out, how much people know about it. So don't worry about it if you're not in the leaderboard, but if you're on there, well done. Now we still got 3 more questions, so things will probably change. Now, question 5. How long can it take for a rat to die after ingesting fast action or rapid kill SCAR, so second generation anticoagulant rodenticides? Is it 10 seconds, 10 minutes, 10 hours, or 10 days? Yep, so the answer is up to 10 days, or some studies have actually shown up to 2 weeks, which is a long time to be, suffering from poison and then die. So SCARs quite often are sold as fast action, rapid kill, but there is nothing fast or rapid about the death that's caused in rodents or anything that consumes this poison. Right, so second last question, 6th question. Which of the following wildlife has been recorded to be exposed to SCARs, so second generation anticoagulant rodenticides? Is it owls, possums, frogs, snails? This is a bit of a trick question because the answer is all of them. So you probably have heard about owls because that is probably the most commonly used examples when we are talking about this issue. But we have also found, these are what I'm talking about here is the properly kind of peer-reviewed scientific research of scientific paper. So possums have been found to be exposed, frogs. These are all Australian examples, or including Australian examples, but overseas things like snails have also been found to be exposed or carrying this S-gas. So we can start to see how far this poison has spread throughout our ecosystems and food webs, because anything that eats any of these animals will get poisoned as well. All right, the last question. How many percent of tawny frogmouth that we have studied were exposed to second generation anticoagulant rodenticides? Was it 25, 50, 75, or 95%? The answer is unfortunately 95%, and this was a big shock to us as well. We did expect some might be, but we just definitely did not expect 95% of tawny frogmouth that we sampled, that studied, to be, carrying SCARs in their liver. And these samples that we studied were, animals that died of other causes. They died. It's not that they died because of poisoning, but they came into us because they were found as roadkill or any other reasons. So it was quite a bit of a shock to us, especially, Tony Frogmouth, as you can tell. I love Tony Frogmouth, Australian bird of the year this year as well. Such a kind of iconic, species that we live with. All right, so let's see where we are at. The leaderboard, and it might change things. Oh, CNZ Denik, well done. Like I said, I don't have any prize. I'm sorry, but you've got the bragging rights, I guess. So well done. So don't worry about it if you didn't get, some of the questions right, because that's exactly why we are here, why I'm giving this seminar, so that we can learn a bit more about this really important issue. So that was a bit more of a summary, kind of finding out, how much you know. So let's get right into talking about the issues. But I would like to start from where this whole thing started. That chemical revolution is where it has started. So humans have started using synthesized chemicals a lot in very, very, wide scale because of the rapid rise in human populations, because that created the need for food security and disease control. And since like 1940s, I guess, the agriculture has been intensifying, which meant that we wanted to, there was a need to control agricultural pests, things like rodents, insects, but also there was a need to, kind of, I guess, manage disease in a more modern way. So things like insect-borne diseases, for example, malaria. So from all of these, humans started using synthetic chemicals a lot in a very, very kind of large scale. With that came unintended ecological impacts, right? And probably the most commonly known example of this is DDT. So, Rachel Carson, very famous scientist and also writer, have published Silent Spring in 1962, exposing the ecological issues with DDT. Now, DDT was the first synthetic insecticides, and it used to be thought as a wonder chemical because it was so effective in managing, insects populations. So it was used to manage things like malaria and also insect pests. And it actually did dramatically reduce malaria death and other insect-borne diseases, especially in developing countries. And it was thought to be really a great chemical because it was non-water soluble, meaning that, rain resistant. So even if it rains or it doesn't get broken down easily, it doesn't get diluted easily. But that also meant that it can and it did bioaccumulate. So bioaccumulation is, it is when or I guess the process where chemicals can accumulate inside the body of animals. And this happened with DDT because, like I said, it breaks down very, very slowly. So it was accumulating in fat tissues, right, of the animals. And even though they are not water soluble, it still creates, these little droplets, and they can get into waterways. And then, the microorganisms in the water will get affected. A small fish will eat hundreds and thousands of these affected microorganisms, and then bigger fish will eat, hundreds of these affected poisoned fish. And then eventually, as you go up the food chain, the concentration was also increasing, or accumulation, it was accumulating a lot more in predators as you go up the food chain. So it was magnified in predators. And by the time it gets to, the apex predators, so the top predators at the top of the food chain, like, eagles, the concentration was so high that it actually was causing eggshell thinning, which meant that, whatever that the eggs that they lay was so thin and I guess brittle. Whenever they sit on the egg, it will break, which obviously have a direct impact on the reproduction of that, particular species. And this was not just one species, and it was widespread issue. So it actually led to global decline of predatory birds. Now, I guess good thing about this, well, it doesn't sound so good, but eventually people learned about this, right? And then realized that it is happening and it was caused by this DDT and bioaccumulation. So people like Rachel Carson raised awareness, it became a big movement, and people pushed the government to change the regulation. So that awareness and push actually led to the ban of DDT in much of the world, which is a good news because then we started seeing populations or these species recovering. So one of the species, for example, that was impacted was bald eagle in the US. And this is just quickly the history of what happened. So in this one particular area, Chesapeake Bay in USA, they had this, 600 to 800 breeding pairs of bald eagle in 1930s. But then the DDT came in. It was widely used, throughout 40s, 50s. And then people started to realize what's happening. And by the 70s, there were only 60 breeding pairs left. But in 1972, fortunately, DDT was banned for the, most applications in USA. And after about 30 years, remember these top predators are quite often slow breeding animals, so they don't bounce back that quickly. But in 30 years, the number bounced back similar level to what it was before. And after that, they kept, increasing in number, which is a good news. So this can happen and this has happened. But at the moment, what we are worried about is this anticoagulant rodenticides. In Australia, especially, it's not regulated. So we think this might actually be another silent spring that is happening right in front of our eyes. So let's talk about rodents, or rodents versus humans, because we go way back, humans and rodents, and humans have been always battling against rodents for food security and health, especially, like black rats, brown rats, house mice, because they are such a, I guess, successful species. They breed so quickly. And because they're actually smart as well, they adapt to management, whatever the management is practice we try to put in, they can adapt very quickly. So for example, if they eat something and if they get sick, they will stop eating that particular bait. So they kind of develop this behavioral resistance very quickly. Also because they have such short cycle or life cycle, so they can breed when they're like 6 weeks old, and they can have multiple litters of large litters every year. So they go through short life cycle very quickly, which also means that they can develop genetic resistance very quickly as well. So this meant that the humans have constantly exploring new approaches to control these rodent, I guess, issues. And rodenticides is one of those, I guess, management practices that humans have been taking. So rodenticides are poisons that we use to kill or target rodents, I guess. And anticoagulant rodenticides in particular have been becoming very, very popular. So I just wanted to talk about how anticoagulant rodenticide works at this point. So like I said, when we were doing the quiz, it blocks vitamin K cycle. Now, over the bred animals, vitamin K is such an important part of our survival because it plays critical role in blood coagulation. So blood clotting. So for example, if you have a cut, the blood will eventually stop because blood coagulates. If vitamin K is not there, that coagulation doesn't happen and you will just keep bleeding, which obviously has, massive impact in your survival or health. Now, the vitamin K is normally stored in liver in kind of deactivated form. And this thing called vitamin K cycle then reactivates the vitamin K so they can be used when it needed. Now, what anticoagulant rodenticide does is it blocks that cycle. So if you ingest these anticoagulant rodenticides, then your blood coagulation function is disrupted or it's reduced. If the dose is high, it will completely stop. So it can lead to uncontrolled bleeding, internal and external as well. So when a rat, for example, consumes lethal dose of anticoagulant rodenticides, it starts bleeding uncontrollably inside, outside. It leads to then lethargy, pain, confusion, thirst, all those, all sorts of different symptoms, and eventually will lead to death. Now, like I said in the quiz, this process can take you know, 10 days, 2 weeks. So it's not a quick process, and it's not a nice way to die either, as you can imagine. So to control rodenticides, humans have developed anticoagulant rodenticides. Now, first, we had this group of rodenticide called first generation anticoagulant rodenticides, or in other words, FGARs, we tend to say. So these are things like warfarin, you might have heard of, or pindone, you might have heard of it. It's not necessarily for rats, but pindones in Australia tends to be used to control rabbits, for example. So there are at least 4 or 5 FGARs, first generation anticoagulant rodenticides, that are registered for use in Australia. Warfarin was first developed in 1948, and all of these FGARs were used quite widely, especially in 1950s, you know, when they came out. Again, people thought it was amazing, you know, chemicals. The thing with FGARs are that the rats will need multiple doses to reach that, you know, lethal dose. And FGARs can be broken down in the liver and in the body, and then kind of eliminated by animals, you know, via urine and feces. So all of these meant that rats or rodents, I should say, actually started developing resistance as early as 1960s. So that obviously became an issue because these poisons weren't working as well as it did before anymore. So what happened was then humans then developed second generation anticoagulant rodenticides, or SCARs, which was a lot more potent version of these anticoagulant rodenticides. And these things include, you know, chemicals like rodifficum, which is the most commonly used SCARs at the moment. So these SCARs, so the second generation ARs, were developed in 1970s. And like I said, they are a lot more toxic. So for example, rodifficum is up to 100 times more toxic than warfarin. And this is so that it will only take one dose for the rodents to actually, you know, reach that lethal dose. So rats will only need to eat it once, or one dose. And it's called fast acting quite often, or single dose chemicals. And you have probably seen all of these or some of these in shops. They are widely available. Anyone can buy it in supermarkets, hardware stores, even online. There's no limit to, you know, how many you can buy, which one you can buy. You can mix and match, and pretty much you can do anything because there's no one really, you know, enforcing how to actually use these highly toxic poison. And SGARs, because of this availability, you know, seemingly effective, I guess, rodent control is now most commonly used rodenticides. And some of them even, you know, are designed to be thrown into like roof cavity or wherever you need to use. Or it comes in pellet forms, which is very easily carried around, or, you know, spread around. Or you can even buy this big bucket full of poison, and no one is stopping you to just put it out there in the backyard. So at the moment, especially in Australia, you know, people can buy it anytime, use it however you want. Now, why are we so worried about SCARs? Because they are non-discriminatory poison. Like I said, all vertebrates, a lot of animals, most of animals have vitamin K cycles. SCARs attack vitamin K cycles, you know, very, very well. They are very potent. So any animals that ingest this poison can be impacted. And at the moment, especially in Australia, they are used, you know, in a way that's very, very accessible by any other animals, including humans, like children, or also your pets. So people will just chuck it in the roof. You know, one of the poisons or the SCARs that you can find, the baits, if you look at the back of it, it actually suggests to throw it in your roof cavity, for example. So any other animals, you know, any animals can have access to that poison, which is very, very highly likely to lead to non-target species poisoning. So this is when animal other than rodents, so the pest rodents, actually ingest this poison and get poisoned. So it's a direct consumption of the poison, but it's a non-target species. On top of this, S gas especially, a lot more so than F gas, persist in livers for a long, long time. So once the animal ingests, the S gas, it can stay in livers for up to or more than 200 days. That's a long, long time. Even if the animal's dead, it still stays in the liver because it does not get broken down easily at all. And also that prolonged death, so that rats can, eat the bait, lethal dose, but they will be still walking around, staggering around, slowly dying, but they're still moving around. And while they're moving around, they're lethargic. They're not, they can't run. They don't have energy, so they tend to go back to easy food source, a bait. So they can keep accumulating much higher dose than the lethal dose while they are actually dying. And also these rats or rodents or any animal that consume this poison, they show reduced escape response. They're very weak, so they can't run. They're confused, so they'll come out in the open during the day, for example. So they're actually very, very easy prey for our predators. All of these combined means that this S gas bioaccumulate a lot. It can bioaccumulate a lot. Also, biomagnification is the issue. So again, predators need to eat a lot of these small animals, 50 rats, for example. That means they will end up carrying all the poison from those 50 rats in their liver. So the poison gets more and more concentrated as you go up the food chain. And this is then causing the secondary poisoning of our predators. So this is why S gas are very dangerous, and we are very worried about how it's being used, especially in Australia. So at this point, I'd like to talk about what we as a team and research team has found so far. So we call it a powerful owl mystery and powerful owl story. We kind of stumbled upon this issue of, as anticoagulant rodenticide impact on wildlife. So especially two researchers, so Raylene and also John, they have been studying Victorian powerful owl population for decades, right? They've got a lot of knowledge. And powerful owl is a kind of iconic apex predator in Victoria or in eastern part of Australia. They are right at the top of that food chain, which means they are very, very important for the whole ecosystem because they are putting that, top-down pressure to all other animals that are below them in the food chain. If they are removed from the whole ecosystem, the balance is broken. So it has, the whole impact on the whole ecosystem if these apex predators impacted. Now, like many other apex predators, powerful owls are also threatened because they tend to have very specific habitat requirement. For example, they need tree hollows, to raise the chicks. And also urbanization, habitat loss, that's all kind of acting to threaten this particular species. Now, during the COVID lockdown in 2020, 2021, we started getting a very high number of reports of powerful owls dying. And we were receiving, quite a few carcasses of these powerful owls, which was very highly unusual. In this 1 year or so, we, I think, ended up receiving 8 or 9 carcasses from the public, concerned public. So we obviously started worrying because something must be going on for this many, apex predator to just start dying. So we sent all of these carcasses, including a few that we already had in a freezer for postmortem and also very wide toxicological screening. So at this point, we didn't know what was happening. So we were testing for everything, including, herbicides, insecticides, rodenticides, heavy metal, anything that we can think of. But at the end, the results came back and it was very, very clear what was happening. So from all these powerful owl samples, 83% of them were exposed to brodifacoum, that most commonly used S gas, that second generation anticoagulant rodenticide. 28% of the samples were exposed to multiple types of anticoagulant rodenticides. So these poisons were getting into apex predator, the powerful owl. So this obviously really worried us because, what's going on? If it's happening to powerful owl, well, it's happening, out there to other species. And one thing also is that the powerful owls don't really eat rodents normally. So what is happening? So we decided to do wider sampling and testing. And this is what we found. Um, so we tested powerful owl, tawny frogmouth, southern boobook, and eastern barn owl. So public, we put out call out to public, wildlife vets, wildlife carers to keep the carcasses if they come across any fresh dead birds, to freeze them and then send it to us so that we can test them. And turns out, 88% of powerful owl, like I said, 95% of tawny frogmouth, southern boobook 92%, 100% of eastern barn owls that we tested had escars in their liver. I also want to point out, especially for tawny frogmouth, how high the concentration was that we found in their livers. So the red one bar shows that, the lethal level concentration of escars in the liver. So overall, 92% of all the birds of prey that we tested were exposed to escars. Now, this was, we expected again, some level, but we did not expect this 90, 100% of samples to be actually containing escars. Now, for boobooks, barn owls, and tawny frogmouth, we can understand where or how it's happening because they do eat rodents. But for powerful owls, we really were not sure where it was coming from because they don't eat rodents. Their main food source are possums. So naturally, we then started thinking, okay, then maybe we should check possums. So we did. Again, we called, put a call out to public, all our amazing collaborators to collect possum carcasses. And this is what we found. Again, 91% of common brush-tailed possums were exposed to escars. We can kind of see this. We did expect some level, but we didn't expect 91%. We think they are possibly just, ingesting the poison directly. So non-target species poisoning. We were very surprised with 40% with the common ring-tailed possums though, because they're follivorous. They mostly eat leaves, flowers, fruits. So we still not 100% sure how it's happening, but we do think it's that, direct consumption of the baits. If you throw the baits up in the roof, if these guys are there, they'll probably eat it. So that's what we think is happening. So at the moment, from our research alone, we know that all of these widely available, products are getting into rodents as we intend to, but then that is poisoning our, nocturnal birds of prey and also tawny frogmouth. It's also impacting our possums. Then it's likely getting into other species that eat possums, so things like powerful owls. But then we should also think about what else is getting impacted in our ecosystems. So other studies have shown so many different native species being impacted. So frogs are one of them, but also quolls, Tassie devils, even cannabis cockatoos. There's so many different species now that we know are actually being exposed to escars. Overseas, researchers have found so many other species as well, including snails and slugs. They are getting into, those, I guess, supposedly non-target animal proof containers because they can get in there and they're ingesting these poisons. So anything that eats these guys will obviously be impacted as well because they, again, bioaccumulate. What else is actually directly eating these poisons? Also, what else is eating these rats and mice and then getting poisoned? So we're now starting to see this whole picture of how widely kind of spread this, poison is in our ecosystems. And it's not just wildlife. It impacts humans as well because it's a poison that works on humans too. So there are obviously accidental poisoning cases every year. And this is a old study that was done in 1996, but they looked at the rodenticide accidental poisoning that happened in Victoria, especially in children, and they found that the 90% of the poisoned children, well, they were poisoned because they directly consumed rat baits. So the rat baits, even though it's supposed to be, placed in areas where it's out of reach of children, pets, some kids were still getting into it and then getting poisoned. Also, a lot more recent case. So last month this happened. So at least 5 people were poisoned by Brodificum in Queensland. And now the authority has found that it was through this homemade food product that was sold locally at market or something. And I'm actually not surprised that this has happened because a lot of people keep these poisons, the rat baits in cupboard or wherever. And I really don't think it was, intentional poisoning, but it's just because how widely available this poison is at the moment. It's not surprising that this has actually happened. And not just accidental poisoning, but unintentional, poisoning as well through food chain. Again, humans are carnivores. We eat globally as well, but also in Australia too. We do eat bush meat, wild meat, right? We do eat things like kangaroos, feral pigs, deer, ducks. They could be impacted. And globally, a lot of people, especially indigenous communities, rely on wildlife meat. So if the wildlife is impacted by rodenticides, it could well be impacting humans as well. So it's not just a wildlife, environmental issues, but it's a human health issue as well. So we really think S-gas is actually our new silent killer, and we really need to be paying more attention, doing more surveillance, doing a lot more research, and putting in more regulation around the use of S-gas. So speaking of regulations, what's happening, right? So in EU, USA, Canada, the public sale of S-gas actually have been banned. And S-gas can used only by trained professionals because of this really high risk to non-target species, including humans, and secondary poisoning. But in Australia, S-gas is regulated by APVMA, so Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority. Now, actually, the use of ESCA is regulated more in agricultural setting than in, residential settings. So, for example, in cropping settings, they are actually not allowed to use ESCAs. Livestock farming is slightly different. They can use ESCAs, but each of the industry actually has guidelines on how to use ESCAs safely. Now, when it comes to the public or residential use, there's no such things, right? Again, anyone can buy it from supermarkets, however many you want, and you can use it however many, however, I guess, whatever the way you want to use. You can chuck it in the backyard, you can throw it in the roof. So it's really unregulated when it comes to the public use, and that's where a big issue lies in Australia. So currently, APVMA is actually doing a review on the use or the sales of ARs or anticoagulant rodenticides in Australia. So this review started in 2021, and it was supposed to be completed in 2-3 years, but it's still ongoing. And the decision was expected on their website. Currently, they still say July 2025, which obviously has passed, and they have updated since then, saying expected by late October, which again obviously has passed. So we think it's coming out sometime soon, but we are keeping eye on it. And after they have make decision or they make the decision available to the public, there will be 3-month public consultation period. But while we are waiting for this decision, we are hoping to keep building evidence, especially within Australia, because the government, previously have said, well, we don't have enough evidence in Australia that it's impacting wildlife. So we are now really trying to build this evidence, and there are not many of us working on this issue, but there are some great researchers throughout Australia. So there are a great group in WA, for example, Tasmania, obviously here at Deakin, we are all trying to build this evidence together. So that's what's happening regulation-wise. But while we're waiting for it, what can we do individually at home? What's the best way to actually manage rodents, if you're not using S-gas? the best way, like any other issue, is prevention, right? So that's where we always should be starting. So blocking access of the rodents to wherever the area that you don't want them to access. So if there's a hole, fill it. Temporary good way to fill apparently is that sticking those I guess metal wires or yeah, there's little wools. I guess the metal wool, steel wools into holes if you need to just quickly plug it and then maybe come back with a proper wire metal mesh later. So blocking access is a big one, but also another big one is removing food source. So for example, sweep up food from your chick pens if you don't want rodents in there, or don't feed your pets outside. Always feed pet inside. And once the pet's finished eating, don't leave the food out because that's a great food source for rodents. Don't feed wildlife. Don't leave seeds or fruits out there because you are just feeding rodents and they're going to start coming to your house. Securely storing food. If there are fruits or veggies at home, pick up fallen fruits or veggies. If you're composting, make sure your compost system is enclosed. And maybe if you have things like palm trees, rodents love palm trees. So maybe, consider eventually changing it or replacing them with native trees or native shrubs. And third one that not many people actually talk about, but I think is a really, really important part of whole prevention is encouraging natural predators in your home, around your house, or, in your surroundings. So owls, big native birds are great controllers of rodents. So make sure all the big trees with hollows are retained in your area, in your council. Also, make sure again not using S-gas. Why? By using S-gas, we are really entering this vicious cycle. I feel like because we're using S-gas, killing some rodents, but more importantly, killing a lot of these natural predators of rodents. Now, these predators, they don't breed as quickly as rodents. So rodents will come back quickly, but these natural predators are not coming back quickly. So they're nothing that's actually eating these rodents. So we actually might actually be making matter worse in long term. So it's really important that we consider encouraging natural predators in, I guess, in our environment. Now, after all of these, I guess, prevention, if you still think rats or rodents are getting into your house, first thing you want to do is actually identify the species, actually confirm that it is, pest rodents, so black rats, brown rats, house mouse that are causing problems. So maybe set up patrol cameras, or if you engage, responsible pest management companies, they will probably do that for you as well. Once you have identified that it is actually black rats, for example, that's causing issues, then maybe set live traps. Now, live traps are way better than other lethal traps or rodenticide because it eliminates that issue of non-target animals being impacted, right? And once you actually catch that problematic rats, then you can manage or control the rats. Now, for some reason, it's still an issue, then maybe think about lethal traps or natural or green baits. So those are anticoagulant rodenticide baits. That's supposed to be safer, but again, these things still carries that risk of non-target species being impacted. So these things should never be the first point of call. And then in the very, very, very last resort, maybe a very small, I guess, chance that you might be, I guess there might be a room for F-gas or first generation anticoagulant rodenticides only used in bait stations. Again, those stations that stops or minimizes other animals from accessing those baits. But again, things can get in there and it still carries a risk of non-target poisoning, but also secondary poisoning. So these are very last resort. And whatever we do, please do not use S-gas, the second generation anticoagulant rodenticides. I know it's available everywhere, but they really should not be used by public. So there are a lot of resources, amazing resources online that could be used when you're considering all of this rodent management. So this is just one example. So this is a brochure by Kenyana Wildlife Rehabilitation Center based, around Perth, and it talks about, other alternative ways of managing rodents and why, rodenticides is impactful. There are a lot of resources. So if you look around, you can find a lot of information on this. Now, outside of your home, what else can we do to actually, minimize these impacts? One thing you and also council can do is to pledge to become owl-friendly council or owl-friendly organization. Now, this owl-friendly council movement started in WA, and there are quite a few councils now that has pledged to become owl-friendly. What that means is that they pledge to stop using SGARs in managing their properties. So, council properties, so things like sporting grounds, libraries, any buildings that they manage, they stopped using SGARs and now using alternate way of actually managing rodents. And they're also running, providing education resources and running, education sessions exactly like this one. So that's definitely one thing you can do, whatever the organization that you might be able to speak to. Also remember that APVMA, review might come back anytime and there's a public consultation. So definitely have a say, about how SGAR should not be used by the public. And the most important part is to spread the word. People who are using SGARs, as a rodenticide, they're not doing it to harm wildlife, I don't think, most of them. They just don't know the impacts that it can have on wildlife and how dangerous these poisons are. So just talk to people. This is a very recent post that came up, Facebook post that came up on my feed, local community, page. Someone was asking, there's a possums or rats, something in the roof. Any recommendation for local business? It's great that they're trying to engage the professionals in managing this. But the first comment for that was just buy some baits and chuck it in the roof cavity. So even small things like replying to this and say, hey, maybe that's not the best way to go. Don't be confrontational, but maybe try to educate people and provide information that might actually change a lot of people's behaviors. So please spread the word. And hopefully this seminar has helped you learn a bit more about this impact, but also how we can change and minimize the impacts that SGAR is having on wildlife. So thank you so much for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
It's really, really interesting. Those stats are quite mortifying. Yeah, that was a real surprise. We have got a couple of questions. Vicky has asked, what are natural green baits?
Yeah, great question. So these are not baits that are not anticoagulant rodenticides, and you can actually buy some of them at hardware stores and supermarkets. So they're quite often actually called green or natural bait. One of them, I think it's called Ratsack Natural or something, but it's NaCl, so sodium chloride, in other words, salt. But that can be actually used as a kind of bait as well. So they're different style, I guess, types of baits.
Okay, thank you. We've got an anonymous question here. The APVMA are reviewing warfarin. I'm not going to be able to pronounce the next two words. I'm sorry.
Yep.
The next one starts with D. What if the APVMA...
Pardon? What?
Sorry. What if the I've lost the question. I'm not sure how much of that you heard.
Oh, bans them.
What if the APVMA bans them?
Yeah, so these are warfarin and the fascinant, they are all FGARs, so the first generation anticoagulant rodenticides. Now FGARs are slightly better than SGARs because they're less risk, I guess, in terms of secondary poisoning, but there's still risk of non-target species poisoning and some secondary poisoning as well. So there are a lot more of other things that we can still do before we get to that F-gas. So I'll definitely again go with the prevention first, and that actually should eliminate a lot of issues, even if the rat issues as still, rats are still causing issues. Then go through that live trapping or all the other things that we have talked about, and then hopefully you don't have to get to that point of having to use F-gas.
There was a little bit of a question about finding a balance between using old growth, keeping old trees for hollows, versus bushfire risk and that sort of thing. So my sound has gone, has it?
No, I can still hear you.
Yeah. So I guess that's just a balance that you have to find around keeping trees, retaining old growth trees.
Yeah, yes, for sure. And trees, I think especially old growth trees or the trees that bears hollows are such a rare commodity these days. And if we can do our best really to try to retain them, because it's not just owls that we're talking about, a lot of other species, Australian species, rely on these, tree hollows to actually survive. So yeah, we should be doing absolute best to keep them.
Thank you. Reading through the questions, sorry. What bait can be used in a live trap? Stephen has rats in the garden that are doing cartwheels.
Yeah.
And over and around the 3 different traps he has tried to set up. So
so the thing with the traps and any other baits actually, or rodent control, really depends on what other food source you have available around it as well. Because even if you set the traps or set the bait, whatever it is, if there are a lot of other food source around, rats are not going to prioritize those food that you have set to control rodents. So I will probably start looking at how you can minimize the other food source around the area. And then, pumpkin seed peanut butter actually will probably work quite well. Peanut butter and oats mixed in quite often works well as well. So, as Stephen said, I think, he has actually said it. There's too much food around. Yeah.
If you use live trapping, what do you do with the rodents?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So native rodents, obviously, let it go, because we have quite a few native rodents in Australia as well, including bush rats, and they're amazing native creatures, and that's why live trapping is a great way to go, because you can differentiate those rodents. If it's hard to identify them, there are a few, for example, Facebook pages that will help with it too. So there's Australian Mammal ID page that you can, or group that you can join, and you can send photos in, and people that experts will actually answer, yes, that's black rat, yes, that's brown rats, or that's a native swamp rat, or bush rats. So that would be the starting point. If you do find that it is a black rat or brown rats, you might need to kind of, deal with it, I guess, in a way yourself, or some vets might do it for you. So that's quite often I do understand that's the hard bit with the live trapping. But I feel that it's still better than accidentally, non-intentionally killing native species or non-target species.
I guess potentially have a conversation with your local vet and see if they're willing to in that situation.
And also, I think it's important for us to also understand and realize or remember that, for example, things like bait, if we're putting out the baits, that's still killing those rodents as well as other native species, right? So that action is actually leading to death. So it might not feel like a direct death, but it is still leading to death. So it's that, I think we do need to think about that too.
This might not be an easy one to answer, but Liz would like to know that when the rats are already in your roof space, how do you block the holes without trapping the rats in the roof?
So that's when you might want to engage the, I guess, well-informed, responsible pest management, practitioners or professionals. because they will have a lot of resources and I guess ways to deal with the issues that the rats in the roof. And yeah, blocking the holes. I mean, I guess you need to find the holes first, and then yeah, I think go at it with tip, and then hopefully if you actually remove the food source and all the attractants for the rodents, that will hopefully mean that they will eventually kind of quiet down as well.
Okay, thank you. I think it might be the last question. I've got somebody who would like to know why you're recommending FGARs.
I'm not recommending FGARs. I want to make this very, very clear. That's a very, very last resort. And FGAR, I still think FGAR should not be used because it is still a very, non-discriminatory poison that can impact non-target animals, including humans. So prevention is what I'm recommending, and then other options like live trapping. So yeah, thanks for asking that question.
Thank you. I think that pretty much wraps it up. If any of the questions we've missed, if anybody else has questions or they think of questions after tonight, keep an eye on your inbox. There will be an email coming out sometime in the next day or two, which will have a link or instructions on how you can submit questions, and we can get those answered for you. So on that note, I don't think if we don't have any other questions, I'd like, have I missed any? I don't think so.
I'm just checking.
Oh, there's the last one there. How do we find a professional to assess our house?
Yeah, so well, I guess you have to look around your local, pest management professionals or controllers, and it might be a good good idea to actually ask them questions about, and then kind of figure out if they are well informed or kind of responsible, or wildlife sensitive, conscious yeah, pest management practitioner, I guess.
Thank
Yeah.
you. There's a few other comments, and some questions have been answered by other participants.
Kind of. Yeah, I can see the comments by Corinne as well. I agree. I used to volunteer for wildlife rehabilitation centers, and we have tried to treat a lot of brush-tailed possums and a lot of different native species that come in with rat poisons, and that's really not a yeah, great thing to see. Yes, horrific way to die. I agree. And I agree, Christina. Snakes should be considered helpful predators. I agree.
Have you had any success or heard success with ultrasound emitting devices successfully driving
Yes.
rodents away?
So I haven't actually seen like studies, or maybe there are studies out there. I have heard of these ultrasound emitting devices, but I have also heard that they kind of might get used to it eventually. With the ultrasound devices, just like any other things, I mean, it probably doesn't have, secondary poisoning impacts and so on, but it might actually have impacts on other species as well, because some species, wildlife species, are a lot more sensitive to ultrasound compared to, say, humans or rodents. So just be, I guess, mindful of that. But like I said, it doesn't have risk of secondary poisoning, so it probably is better than SCARs.
I think maybe a final question from Vicky. How far away can we let native rodents go from the house? Do they find their way back if we let them out too close to the house?
So native rodents. So if you catch native rodents and if you want them out, I guess, yeah, it is better to release them close to where you have caught, because they can be territorial. And also, depending on the states as well, it actually is illegal to move them too far. But I guess, again, the prevention comes, first. So if you can close those holes, the entry points for those native rodents to come in, and then, releasing them somewhere nearby into bush, or, in the gardens or wherever it is, or maybe a chook pen, hopefully that kind of stops the problem or issues of rodents, native rodents coming into your house or chook pens.
Lovely. Thank you. Okay, I don't think I have any other questions. There is another comment, sorry, from Christina. David Lindenmeyer's 50 years of forest research has revealed that old growth trees, mature forests, burn less frequently and less intensely than disturbed, fragmented, logged, cleared forests.
Yes.
Just
Thank
as a
you.
comment to throw in.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. And just, please spread the word. Keep talking to people. Obviously, the people who attended this session obviously know about these issues. So, please spread the word.
Lovely, thank you. And this recording will be on the council's website in a couple of weeks, so you can direct people to that as well. Share it with your friends and family and spread the word. Thank you very much. That was a fabulous information session. Appreciate your time. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
I think we'll
Thank you
say
for having me.
that's okay. It's all right.